we have reached the lucky number 7 when it comes to the Archetype rematch series. And just like I said in my last Archetype analysis, aka my previous video, we also have no new Blue Eyes support cards, and like I said in that video as well, let's keep it up. Let's keep it up as long as this series lives, or as long as I'm doing YouTube. Anyway, this Archetype analysis is brimming with all sorts of quality cards, and yeah, there are some pack fillerific garbage, but most of the time it's are pretty good. So let's start off with an archetype that is making its first appearance on this series, and those are LYRILUSCs. LYRILUSCs obtained a few new cards, 2 main deck monsters, 2 Xyz monsters, 2 spells, and a trap. A hefty lineup for a first time archetype showing on the series. And well, here we go with our first monster, which is BERYL CANARY, which is essentially a double special summon, however you put it, because of the archetype's way to get resources into the graveyard and in the hand. But the inheritance effect is actually really interesting, as the Xyz monster gains 200 additional attack, which is of course gonna beat over that power crept Garrett Hulk. And also it prevents the control of the monster from being switched, which is actually uh, really interesting, seeing how we don't have many control switching cards in the metagame that are actively ran. We have mind control, but I think that one has a level restriction, if I am correct. No, it doesn't. Okay, but you know, mind control is not the most versatile option out there. Brain control has been power crept, so it absolutely so it doesn't see any play, so it cannot even affect LYRILUSC Xyz monsters. And change of heart is still banned, so yeah. But anyway, it's a very neat protection to have, seeing how BERYL CANARY is one of their better monsters. And the same goes for CELESTE WAGTAIL, which basically searches out the LYRILUSC back row, which is the newest addition of the archetype. So it would make sense to get a back row searcher, and of course, WAGTAIL is always ran at 3 because the new back row is absolutely insane. And let's go on to their Xyz monsters first before we get to sample in the deliciousness of the back row. First of which we have LYRILUSC PROM THRUSH, which is another rank 1 with the exact same summoning conditions as Assembled Nightingale. And yeah, it has a very the schizophrenic battle boosting effect, where you can detach many Xyz materials to have a monster gain 300 for each, and this card has an innate 500 attack point boost per every Xyz material. I think Assembled Nightingale is 200, I think, for each one. Not too sure about that. It's been ages since I did the LYRILUSC video, but anyway, yeah, and no matter how you use it, if you use it on this thing, it will always have lower attack, but you can always use it on other monsters to increase their attacks. But again, this one kind of enforces you to have multiple extra deck monsters on the field at the same time, which is not too hard to do, but all those other monsters might have very low attack values because you're summoning them as turbo as possible. However, there is a spell card which highly encourages summoning as many extra deck monsters as possible, and we'll get to that. The other new extra deck monster they've gotten is another rank 1, which is LYRILUSC Ensemble Robin, which has the exact same stats and conditions, exact same stat boost, and this one has something with a little more meat instead of just having battle focus. You can detach a material from this card, then target one monster's. When this, of course, is activated on an opponent, special summons a monster, and you basically get to return it to the hand, which is really neat. But again, targeting a bit limits you to what you can actually do with this. But still, you can remove pretty much 90% of your threats with this thing. And if this card is in your possession, is sent to your graveyard by an opponent's card, you can also return a LYRILUSC monster in your graveyard to your hand, meaning you can recycle your extra deck monsters or your main deck monsters. You can continue your plays and swarm the field in the next turn like crazy. Both of these are worth running, at least 2 of each. That is what I would recommend. And also about 3 assembled Nightingales because of our first back row piece, LYRILUSC Bird Sanctuary. This thing is flat out amazing, as it can literally turn assembled Nightingale into a very potent direct attacker. I've heard stories of it going over 3,000. Maybe not that much, but you can easily get it to over 3,000 if you have very conventional setup in form of highly splashable level 1 monsters, and this basically ensures that Glow Bulb is literally never going to see the light of day because, whew, sweet Jesus, run 3 at all times. Of course, in a build absolutely focused on assembled Nightingale, because not every LYRILUSC build is focused around assembled Nightingale. There are some builds which actively employ summoning independent Nightingale with as much attack points as possible, so yeah. And LYRILUSC Bird Call is an archetypal E-Call which gives you field presence, so it should come to no surprise that you run 3 at all times. And that was it for the spell cards. Now we move on to their final card, which is a trap card, which is Birds of a Feather. LYRILUSC Birds of a Feather. Anyway, it's a very unconventional attack draining effect, basically turning all of your opponent's monsters to 0 attack or even very low attack, like 200 or 100 attack beat sticks, which is pretty funny. But again, it's not something that is entirely necessary in the deck, but it's a decent side option if anything, so I would advise running 1. So yeah, that was the LYRILUSC archetype, and I gotta say I'm pretty impressed, because back when I reviewed the original just released from the factory floors Arc 5 archetype that it originally was, they were just almost unstoppable because of how their focus on level 1 monsters equaled into very splashable and very potent extra deck monsters, which have very great survivability and versatility when it comes to either beatdown or control effects. And over the years, they kind of slightly but surely degraded in quality with the evolution of the game and with the addition of new, better or more versatile cards into the game, or more versatile archetypes. And now with this single support wave, they've slightly jumped up back to that level of relevance back in their days when they still had it. So yeah, maybe they will, and that relevance will last a bit longer than the first one, but who knows? Maybe we'll even get some more LYRILUSC support cards. So yeah, they were basically given the same treatment as Wind Witches and Luna Lights. So yeah, if we were going by logic, which archetype is bound to get support next, Luna Lights will be the next ones to receive it, since they were the first ones to do so, and they were also only present on my first Archetype rematch volume. So yeah. And now we're sticking with the theme of Arc 5 as we go on to the next archetype, which received support, quite a lot of support, and those are SPEEDROIDs. SPEEDROIDs received this card here, SPEEDROID Magic Hound, which is a very cute short card from for your SPEEDROID Synchro monsters, summoning them directly from the extra deck. It's also a level 3 tuner, so what's not to love? Then we have another level 4 tuner, which is SPEEDROID Party Horn, and this thing is essentially an archetypal Pot of Duality, with a bit more restrictive effect of what happens to the other to the other excavated cards, because this thing does not allow you to activate up to 3 cards, but up to the number of wind monsters you control. So you'll always be able to excavate 1 card and add it to your hand. So yeah, it's essentially always a +1 in card advantage whenever he's summoned. Not the most necessary thing in the deck because, again, the Speedroids are not that focused on level 4 tuners. But again, it can be a decent surprise if anything. And now we move on to their extra deck monster, and first of which is HI-SPEEDROID CORK Blaster, which for some reason is so unbelievably good. If you're not running 3 of these, you're not playing Speedroids, just goodbye. I do not have to say anything else about it. And then we have a new Clear Wing Synchro Dragon evolution, and that is Crystal Clear Wing Synchro Dragon. This thing is a level 10 monster, which requires a tuner synchro monster and a non-tuner clear wing monster. And it's basically a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon for back row, and it has some additional effects, but its summoning condition makes it way more restrictive and slightly worse than the original Crystal Wing, since negating monster effect is such a valuable effect, even more valuable than negating back row. So yeah, I mean, if you have some extra deck space, it does not hurt to run at one as a neat little surprise for the opponent. So yeah, keeping up with the theme of Speedroids, we have our final extra deck monster, which is HI-SPEEDROID Clearwing Rider, which is a level 11 with 3500 attack and 2000 defense, and requires a wind tuner and one or more non-tuner wind synchro monsters as materials, which is a pretty costly summoning condition for a level 11 monster. But keep in mind, Speedroids are somewhat focused on manipulating their levels all the time, so it's not that bad. But as for what this thing does, it straight up allows you to summon two level 7 wind synchro monsters with different names from your extra deck. So you basically are guaranteed to make one of them into a crystal wing. So yeah, the best targets to do so, you basically summon two clear wings and turn one of them into a crystal wing, and bam, you have 3 monster effect negations per turn. So yeah. But again, and also you basically need to summon tribute this synchro summon card. So you basically have to build a deck if you want this sort of play to be focused on summoning it as fast as possible, which can actually dampen some consistency aspects of the deck. So again, he remains at a one-off for the rest of the time, unless they get some nice card which can help get him out a bit easier, because uh, Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon is a lot easier to summon than him. So yeah. And that was it for the monsters, and now we move on to the back row, which only consists of a spell and a trap. Speedroid Roulette is essentially a double summon from the main deck, provided that you do not roll a 1, meaning you basically run 3 of these at all time, and it's also a quick play, so yeah, that's just amazing. And the last card is Speedroid Dupligate. It's a nice recycling tool, and it basically allows you to summon tokens, and also and it also grants you some spot removal from the opponent's field. So yeah, it's also searchable by the newer support. So yeah, it's a great card. And that was it for Speedroids, and now we move on to the one single solitary Harpy support card, and that is Harpy's Pet Dragon Fearsome Fire Blast. Well, they're trying to hammer in the fact that Harpies really need a rank 7 Xyz monster, and yeah, this thing helps out in hammering that in a lot. Having a neat summoning condition, it can be used as a link material monster, and not to mention, it also provides some an interesting battle protection effect, which is kind of cute, but ultimately unnecessary, as mostly what this thing does is being used as ammo for an extra deck monster of your choice. So yeah, it's also searchable by the archetype, very easily searchable. So yeah, combos well with Harpy Channeler and the original Harpy's Pet Dragon. So yeah, the original is actually still worth running due to the fact that you can actually bombard the field with level 7 monsters to get some interesting plays out of it. So yeah. Anyway, run two to three of these depending on your build preferences. And now our next archetype that received support is the Kuribo archetype. Someone thought it was a good idea to import the 5 Kuribo brothers from the Season 4 filler arc, and the idea ultimately paid off, but only because of one single solidarity support card. Kuribu, Kuribi, Kuribe, and Kuriba all have very underwhelming effects on their own. Kuribe also has another alternative summon effect where you can tribute this card you control and 4 monsters from your hand or field. Basically, all 5 Kuribo brothers on the special summon the Kuri Bandit, which is no longer worth running. And Kuriba has the same thing, but only to summon their new boss monster, the level 5 KURIBABYLON, which is essentially a 3000 attack beatstick if you have all the Kuribo brothers in the graveyard, which is something you're gonna have if you use the if you summon this thing the way how it was intended to be summoned, and it also floats into the 5 Kuribo brothers. But none of these even compare to the quality of the spell card that is focused on summoning them, that being 5-star Twilight. You basically, for the price of tributing a level 5 monster, you can special summon each of the Kuribo brothers, which of course includes the original Kuribo, from your hand, deck, and or graveyard, but they cannot be tributed for a tribute summon, and you can only activate one of these per turn. And since it only prevents you from tribute summoning, which is kind of irrelevant unless you're playing Monarchs, you will always turn a random inconspicuous level 5 monster into 5 link materials. How great is that? And not to mention that level 5 monsters are fairly easy to summon on their own with like one card. You can special summon the Tricky in order by discarding one card, quick draw Synchron by discarding specifically a monster card, using instant fusion to summon any level 5 fusion monster, or retort fusion to summon a level 5 non-effect fusion monster. So yeah, your options are quite limitless with this thing, and I can somewhat guarantee that this thing is going to see tons of competitive play, and that basically any deck that is focused on link spamming or extending combos that is going to be running at least 2 of these and at least one of each, well, optimally one of each Kuribo brother, because they're so accessible with this card unless somebody banishes them. So yeah, this is an all-around fantastic card, and you should always run this thing. And not only Kuribo decks, but also any deck that is focused on extending fields. And that was it for the Kuribo archetype. The next archetype which received support is the BORRELOAD archetype. First of which we have their only main deck monster from this wave, the level 8 DUALWIEL dragon, which allows you to target 2 rocket monsters with different names in your graveyard and special summon them in defense position for the cost of tributing it. And also you can banish it from the graveyard to add a rapid trigger, their fusion spell, and heavy trigger from your deck to your hand. And heavy trigger is an archetypal ritual spell, which is focused on summoning this thing right here, BORRELOAD Riot Dragon, a level 8 ritual monster with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, and it's pretty amazing. First of all, when your opponent would special summon a monster on a quick effect, you can negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster. Is basically way more accessible Tech Genus Halberd Cannon. And you can and if you do destroy that monsters, then destroy this card or one rocket monster you control. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can target a BORREL or a rocket monster in your graveyard, destroy one card in your hand or field, and if you do, add the targeted monsters to your hand, and you can only use each effect once per turn. So yeah, it's basically a way more accessible Tech Genus Halberd Cannon, which basically also provides some nice combo extension and a synergy with the rest of its archetypes, so what's not to love? And if summoned with heavy trigger, of course, it makes him even better, as it prevents him from being destroyed by battle with special summon monsters from the extra deck, and it also makes him unaffected by the monster effects coming from monsters special summoned from the extra deck. Needless to say, ritual builds involving BORRELOAD Riot Dragon are going to have a very fun time, even though rockets are not primarily focused on ritual summoning. So, yeah. Okay, I believe we're about halfway there. Ah, yeah, we are. Oh boy, next up, somebody thought that somebody finally played Tag Force 5 and 6 and realized how much of a masterpiece Sherry's character is. So they decided to turn FLEUR into a very proper archetype, as well as adapt almost everything from the anime that Sherry actually used. First of which we have our only one of our only level 2s, first that being NECRO SYNCHRON, which is a retrain, well, I mean an alternate form of course, FLEUR Synchron, and it basically plays into the gimmick of early Sherry's synchro spamming style and the later Sherry's focus on field control, which is of course displayed in her duel against Aki and Crow. And yeah, this basically ties the two playstyles together even more, as it of course synergizes with Necro FLEUR and Sorcier de FLEUR. So yeah. Next up we have Noble Knight's Spear Holder, which besides its anime effect, which was attributed to add an equip spell from your deck to the hand, with the only effect which actually ties this thing to the Noble Knight's archetype. Uh, it also has the effect that if it is normal or special summon, you can target a level 8 or lower monster you control, and until the end phase its name becomes FLEUR Synchron, which of course is supposed to synergize with their fusion monster in order to basically give you a one card Chevalier de FLEUR. And a decent shortcut to the fusion monster is Horse of the Floral Knight, because this thing is essentially a one card Chevalier de FLEUR, because normal summoning this, you basically add a Noble Knight Spear Holder to your hand, use this thing's contact fusion in order to summon the fusion monster. Fusion monster then revives Noble Knight Spear Holder, and then Spear Holder uses its effect in order to turn it into Chevalier de FLEUR. So yeah, and just to hammer in how much they wanted you to play around with this, we have Noble Knight's Shield Bearer, which straight up searches Horse of the Floral Knights, and of course has its Graveyard Banish effect to draw a card, which of course was its anime effect. It's a bit weird that this thing needs to be banished from the hand in order to do this effect, but I guess they wanted to prevent you from using multiples in order to banish this thing from the graveyard when summoning another Shield Bearer in order to get a free card due to how powerful this combo is. But yeah, it's the only reason I can think of. And we have an original monster, that being White Steed of the Floral Knights, which is a level 6 monster, which essentially can also equate into also one card Chevalier de FLEUR, since of course if you normal summon FLEUR Synchron or Necro Synchron, you basically get to summon this, go into Chevalier de FLEUR, and FLEUR Synchron is with its effect can summon a level 2 tuner monster from your hand in order to go into their newest boss monster, which is really interesting considering the fact that a side character got a monster of this caliber added to the archetype. So yeah, it's not the most searchable thing out there due to it being a wind monster, but yeah, the only thing that can search it out is Noble Knight's Shield Bearer, but the better target is Horse of the Floral Knights and not this thing. So yeah, I would advise running one, maybe two if you have space for it. And our last main deck monster for this archetype is Sage the FLEUR, which is a very interesting level 8 spellcaster, which can special summon itself and also proc the effect of NECRO FLEUR in order to get Sorcier the FLEUR out of the deck and enable a rank 8. So yeah, it's also a dark spellcaster, meaning it's a target for dark magic veil. So yeah, it also has very nice stats, although I wish the defense was a bit higher. So yeah, decent card and a definite staple in FLEUR decks. And now we move on to their extra deck monster. I already mentioned their fusion monster, CENTAUR MINA, which of course appeared in the anime, although its summoning condition was changed to be a bit more generic. In the anime it specifically required Noble Knight Spearholder and Horse of the Floral Knights, but here it requires a Light Warrior and a Beast monster as material. And not to mention, this thing got several good effects in order to make it more viable, along with keeping its original anime effect intact, just how it was used in the anime. So yeah, great card and a definite gateway to their newest boss monster, Baroness the FLEUR, which is level 9, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, it's a level 10. I get thrown off a bit uh, because I cannot. Anyway, it's a completely generic level 10 synchro monster with 3000 attack and 2400 defense. And yeah, this thing is essentially as close as we can get to a level 10 generic Quasar without having to summon multiple synchro monsters in order to go into it. And yeah, and not to mention, this thing also returns itself to the extra deck in order to resummon a level 9 or lower monster from your graveyard, which of course combined with a tuner of the appropriate level can then resummon this thing in order to refresh its once on the field effect. So yeah, this thing is going to see tons upon tons of play. I am absolutely in no doubt. So yeah, the Konami really wanted you to love Sherry, and love Sherry we shall, because good lord, she was such a well written character. So yeah, anyway, definitely run this thing. It's just a phenomenal spectacle. Now we have a few back row pieces. First of which we have Synchro Dilemma, which is actually a very nifty card, as it very accurately portrays Sherry's mindset during the transition between season 4 and 5, or yeah, that's the correct time frame. So yeah, it has two very good effects. It's even good in decks uh, outside of floors. It's basically very good generic synchron support. And yeah, it's it's slightly unsearchable, which dampens its usage a little, but it's still a phenomenal card, and you should consider running a few copies. And our last card is the equip spell Florette the Fleur, which is a bit too specific for my liking, but if you have some space for it, I guess one couldn't hurt. And now we move on to their trap cards, first of which is Revered Banner of Revolution, which is a continuous trap which has some neat protection effects, which redirects your destruction effects onto inconspicuous necro floors in order to swarm the field with sorciers. So yeah, it also searches out Liberty at Last, which until this point was not even an archetypal card. And Liberty at Last is a normal trap that when a monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, allows you to target 2 face-up monsters on the field and shuffle those targets into the deck. And yeah, this used to be a fairly strong form of removal back when it was first released. So yeah, it definitely saw play, although Penguin Soldier was still a slightly better version of this. But if it didn't target, I would have stuff to talk about here, because this would be an even better form of removal. But since Banner of Revolution makes it searchable, I guess it doesn't hurt to run it at least 1 or 2 copies. And that was it for the FLEUR archetype. Yeah, it was quite the spectacle, wouldn't you say? And next up we have on the At Ignister support cards, first of which we have Fighting Spirit, which essentially is a better Idol Reborn, other than the fact that it's not a quick play, and yeah, it doesn't have any other restrictions, but it has some nifty protection effects which you can actually get a lot of mileage from. And the last card is Eyes Show, which is very anime-esque in its design, but if you're going up against some people who have monsters that tend to swing for really high attack values, you can get a lot of field presence, and you can basically summon the Arrival at Ignister in one turn. So yeah, great card, and that is it for the at Ignister archetype. And moving on, we have the Cyber archetype. The Cyber and CYBERDARK archetype, to be more precise, because the recent support wave merged the two decks into one. Like we didn't need that already. Anyway, our first card is the monster card Attachment CYBERN, which is just there. It's supposed to be the retrain of Armored CYBERN, but it's not, and seeing how the original Armed CYBERN is not worth running, neither is this. Anyway, next up we have a much better card, which is Eternal Cyber, a quick play, which is a nifty deck recycle or a monster reborn for your Cyber Fusion monsters. So yeah, it's also a quick play spell, so yeah, it's a card definitely worth running. And our final spell card is CYBERDARK World, which is of course not treated as a Dark World card, because we really need to make that distinction. Anyway, CYBERDARK World basically gives the consolation prize of acquiring a double summon for the archetype for, of course, CYBERDARKs, and not to mention you can it also searches something on activation, and it also lets you snag monsters from the opponent's graveyard, which is something I would be saying it's a very nifty effect if it wasn't for the fact that CYBERDARKs are still limited to goddamn dragons of all things. And of course, the most mileage this thing can provide, and the card that this thing can provide the most mileage out to is their fusion monsters. So yeah. And our final card of the CYBERDARK cards is CYBERDARK Invasion, which is a continuous trap, and it's okay, nothing too amazing, but it has a very nice distinction from all the other supports, but is that it finally allows you to actually uh, it allows you to actually uh, use machine type monsters from your graveyard as well. And not to mention that they've also printed the Declaration of Rebirth, or Rebirth Judgment, however it is called now. It basically finally gives CYBERDARKs the very sparse versatility that they had in the anime. So yeah, anyway, yeah, that is it. That is it for CYBERDARKs, and now we move on to the 3 new Cypher support cards, with their only monster being Cypher Biplane, which is actually a very nifty shortcut to your Xyz monsters, makes them more accessible than ever, and it basically searches other stuff upon floating, which is pretty good. Run a few copies of this all the time. Next up we have Cypher Interference, which, to all of you who thought your ciphers weren't hitting hard enough, this is basically your be-all end-all of removal and beatdown, as you basically want to run as many of these as possible, because, well, it basically turns the Neo Galaxy Eye Cypher Dragon into an 11,000 attack beat stick, which is always an admired feat to see in Yu-Gi-Oh! Absolutely run this thing, and I wouldn't advise maxing out on it because it's not that searchable, and of course you always won't have the appropriate field setup for this effect to go off pretty easily. And also we have Double Exposure, which is also a very nice way to get you into OTK range with Cypher Interference, along with being a cute shortcut to your Xyz monsters, since if you cannot utilize their monster effects to raise the levels of the monsters you're trying to exceed with, this is a nice alternative. So yeah, again, not too searchable, and not to mention that this thing in the anime was not even related to the Archetype, it was just a random level raising card. So yeah, it's a nice card. And that was it for the cipher section of the video. And now we move on to Utopias. And first, our first card for the Utopia archetype is ZS Ouroboros Sage, which focuses on very unconventional attack gaining effects, which is kind of awkward given the fact that this thing is a level 3 in an archetype entirely focused on rank 4 spamming. So yeah, approach this one with caution in my opinion, as it is not a conventional monster by any means. Then next up we have the final Zexal weapon, which was an anime exclusive for the longest time, and that is Sylphid Wing. It's a bit better than ZS Ouroboros Sage. Both are actually similar, but this one actually gives you more freedom with what you can do with your Utopias. So yeah. It's also a level 4 for rank 4 spamming, so yeah, a good card. Next up we have our first Xyz monster for today, and that is Leo Utopia Ray, which is a rank 5 monster which requires 3 level 5 monsters. Has some decent effects, but the main problem I have with it is its summoning condition, since it's a rank 5 which requires 3 level 5 monsters as materials. And not to mention that there only exists a single support card from this newest wave, which helps out in bringing this thing out, but again, it's still a bit too restrictive in its summoning condition to be considered a staple. However, the card you definitely would want to consider running is number 99 Utopia Dragner. And oh boy, this is quite a boss monster indeed. Considering the fact that you can get to this monster of an effect with only 2 level 4 monsters is very frightening, to say the least. Of course, you will need the newest rank up magic in order to achieve this combo, but still, rank up magics are highly searchable, and that new rank up magic itself is very archetypally searchable. So yeah, this is an absolute beast of a monster and the definitive Utopia boss monster in this day and age. And next up we move on to their back row, which only consists of spell cards in this support wave. First of which we have Zexal Catapult, which kind of reminds me of Dark Flat Top, and I cannot remotely figure out why. It allows you to swarm the field with Zexal weapon and ZS monsters, and it gets your levels intact for some Xyz plays, and that's about it. The more prominence this thing has is in its second graveyard effect, where it allows you to banish it to target a card on the field, on the opponent's side of the field, and destroy it. But that also comes with a cost that you need an additional Zexal weapon or a ZS monster in order to get this effect off. But again, this card is more of a more useful as a foolish burial goods target than its actual on activation effect. And then we have Hyper Rank Up Magic Hope Force, the ultimate of the rank up magics the world has ever seen. And yeah, it essentially allows you to summon the rank 10 or higher Utopia or Utopic monsters. Basically gives you a shortcut to the Utopias you never ever wanted to summon in a Utopia deck until today. So yeah, this is one of the better rank up magics in the game, so you cannot go wrong with running this. So yeah. And that was it for the rank up magics. Now we go on to the Zexal Field, which is a field spell which supports all Xyz monsters and not only Utopia monsters, which is absolutely insane. I think that many Xyz decks will find this thing to be really useful, because yeah, you can also get it's part of its effects is kind of unusable since it is a bit archetype reliant, but its first few effects are so very good that I can assure you that almost every XC spam deck is going to be running at least one of these because the benefits this card provides are just that good. So yeah, great card. And now we move on to another archetype which has its first showing on this series, and those are heroes. More specifically, Destiny heroes with 2 spell cards. First of which we have a Dr. D, which is a monster reborn for the archetype for the cost of banishing a Destiny hero from your graveyard. And of course, it can also serve as a warrior returning alive. And it has a very unconventional, well, slightly unconventional attack mimicking effect, which is not the card's primarily feedback, but since it was going to end up in the graveyard anyway because of its monster reborn effect, you cannot go wrong with it. So yeah, it's worth experimenting with. So yeah, it's a 3-off because it's a monster reborn, and for the other effect, it's not going to be used all that much. So yeah. And their final card is the Force, which I am quite mixed on. First of all, it prevents you from drawing, just like the manga version of Infernity Pawn, I believe that was the card. But also it searches out Destiny Hero Plasma from your deck or graveyard, which is kind of busted given the fact that Destiny Hero Plasma to this day is one of the better hero cards in the game. But the other effect it actually provides you is, well, it gives Destiny Hero Plasma some of its anime effects, which the original card does not even have. But the most important fact is that your opponent cannot target any of your cards with card effects, which is the highest form of protection an archetypal card gives to, well, almost everything on the field. So yeah, this is this is a very busted card, provided that you can actually live with the fact that it prevents you from drawing. Well, of course, to be fair, this is circumvented by the fact that you can bounce this thing back with Zephyros the Elite, and yeah, it basically allows you to reset this thing in order to maybe search out another Destiny Hero Plasma, or to be able to draw cards again. So yeah, it's worth experimenting if anything, but it's not a hard staple or anything. And that was it for Destiny Heroes or Heroes in general. And now we have a single solitary card from the Pot archetype. And ladies and gentlemen, I in my life have never seen a more atrocious card than Jar of Generosity. It has the effect that allows you to place a card from your hand on top or the bottom of your deck. Oh man, it's if this card came out in like 1999, I would have called it like a regular card from that time. But the fact that this thing came out in 2021 is appalling. How or who approved this? It's just sad that somebody sat down and approved this. Anyway, don't even look at this anymore. It's just bad. Anyway, now we basically have a few archetypes which only have 1 or 2 support cards added to their ranks. And the first is the Numeron archetype with the spell card Numeron Storm, which is basically a Harpy's Feather Duster, which also burns the opponent for 1000 damage, provided that you control a Numeronious monster, which again is not the easiest thing to accomplish. So yeah, run 1 if anything. And the next archetype which received another one of support cards is the Deep Sea archetype, the Merlantians to be more precise. Merlantian, Deep Sea, yeah, all that jazz. I reviewed all of them in one go. And that is Deep Sea Repetitor, which is a level 5 Synchro Tuner monster. And well, this is by far one of the best Synchro Tuner monsters in the game, and if you're not playing 3 of these, you're not playing Deep Seas or Merlantians for any matter. So yeah, always run 3 and never any less. And next up we have an archetype which received 2 new cards worth of support, and those are Appliancers, also making their first appearance. And we're starting off with the last Link monster that was in the anime, and that is Appliancer Propylion. And I am quite surprised why they didn't just release this along with all the other Link monsters. Why make this thing need to wait a few months in order to be released? Anyway, I think this thing is their highest beat stick, and it has the exact same summoning condition as the rest of the archetype. The rest of the level, the linked ones in the archetype, has the exact same effect even if it's linked or co-linked. So it basically zeroes out the attack of an attacking monster, and combined with some other appliances, it can basically become a very potent beat stick, being able to always apply its attack as damage to the opponent. So yeah, it's another card worth keeping in your household. Get it. Anyway, next up we have the final Appliancer card, which is Appliancer Conversion, a quick play spell, which is actually a very nifty way to rearrange your appliancers in order to either plug them or unplug them into Siltopus. So yeah, this is also a quick play, so it can make for some spicy disruption. So yeah, I'd say definitely run this one. And the final archetype, which received only one card worth of support, are Roids. Yeah, Roids actually got some support, and also I think this is their first also appearance on the show, with the level originally anime exclusive level 8 Dragon Roid, which only had the effect in the anime that while it was in the graveyard, it was treated as Dragon type, and this of course played into the effect of CYBERDARK Dragon in Show's duel against Makoto. I actually have an AMV of that duel on my channel. And basically this thing was given a whole bunch of effects in order to turn Roids even slightly competitive, but it's still not, because all of these effects are really fun. It makes running this thing at 3 an outright staple, and not to mention, due to this thing being a level 8, it's a target for trade-in, so that's even more draw power for the archetype. So yeah, you're getting there, Roids. You're really getting there. So just a few more cards like this, and we might be talking about an actual archetype instead of a goddamn joke from the GX era. Oh boy, that was certainly long but fulfilling. I've had a lot of fun talking about these cards. Volume 8 isn't going to be anytime soon. I currently have 2 cards in the Volume 8 folder, so that's 58 more to go, and I'm really hoping that we get some more Fortune Ladies, and seeing how Burst of Destiny is again Rocket focused and BERYL focused, just like Rising Rampage was, the set which actually got us the newest batch of Fortune Lady cards. Here's hoping we see some more. And also Rising Rampage is also the set where Appaloosa came out, my absolutely favorite, one of my absolute favorite monsters of all time, right next to Stardust Dragon. So yeah, this is definitely a time to be hoping to get hyped up by some new cards you were anticipating so much. Anyway, that is it for this video. I'll meet you guys in the next volume, whenever that might come by. I expect to see it by the end of the year, going by how frequently new already reviewed archetypes are getting support. Who knows? I could be completely off. You never know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. Be sure to check out my Patreon when you got the time. Maybe drop a few donations if you feel like it. And I'll see you all, and have a good day. Peace.